What is up, everyone? It's Monday again. You know what that means. Monday metagame update. And things are actually changing quite a bit. So we'll take a look at standard best of 3, historic, some recent tournaments, and a few brews from Twitter. So let's check it out. All right, so getting into standard, we can see that current meta is a lot of people are playing mono white humans, soldiers, mono red, enchantments, Rakdos midrange, mono red burn. So a lot of it's the same, but a little bit different with enchantments and the humans coming to the one of the more popular decks. And if we look at the results, we actually also see something very surprising. There's a new contender to the throne, Gruul Aggro. I don't know who made it, but apparently there's a Gruul Aggro deck that is doing quite well. 56.6% win rate. Pretty decent chunk of games, 1,200. And it's making use of this new card, Samut. I always say this one wrong, I think. Samut. It is a pretty decent 3-drop that also draws you some cards if it survives, and you can connect with some creatures. So pretty decent. Yeah, looking, I guess people realize that this is kind of a nice card, and there's a lot of hasty creatures in red. So throw this into a mostly red deck, and you can get some pretty interesting results. So it's actually overtaken soldiers and mono red in terms of win rate. Which is an impressive feat. And then enchantments also was doing quite well. So, but it seems like the aggro are just a little bit better than enchantments in best of 1 at least. So yeah, kind of interesting. Our top two decks are two kind of new decks. I mean, we've got Azorius Soldiers, which cut the blue and add in a few new cards, and then Gruul Aggro, which is kind of mono red, adding a little bit of green. So similar decks that we've seen before, but nonetheless new decks. And then enchantments also sitting in the top 5 of the new decks that are doing well. So yeah, I'll take it. A little bit new variety in standard. And arguably, I think this is a little bit easier to deal with than some of the previous decks that were doing very well. Like Reanimator and Rakdos Midrange are pretty different from the aggro deck. So at least with most of these aggro decks, you can kind of plan around it and gear a lot of your decks towards killing creatures or having bigger creatures or board wipes or things like that. So yeah, I think if this becomes our meta, could be healthy if most of the mid-range dies down a little bit. I do see a lot of toxic on the ladder as well, and it seems to be doing okay. So I guess that's kind of the sleeper pick at the moment. So that's it for best of 1. I wanted to take a look at this Gruul deck though a little bit because I thought it was very interesting. So yeah, it is mostly just mono red. You splash for Samut, you splash for Iconoclast in this one at least. And this one had an 89.9% win rate. So this is one of the top Gruul decks. And yeah, everything pretty much has haste. Feldon, Bloodthirsty, Phoenix Chick, Divine Devastator, etc. Squee. And so if any of those creatures or Samut itself deals combat damage to a player, then you're drawing a card, and so it's just a good way to keep the chain rolling in mono red so you don't run out of cards. And I guess they still kind of got to keep a lot of their burn as well. Play with fire, lightning strike, mono, so they didn't really lose a whole lot, and they just added in some card draw. All right, yeah, pretty sweet. Nice innovation there with the new Aftermath set. Then if we take a look at best of 3, we will also see something very surprising. Last week we saw that humans was doing pretty well in best of 3. And if you can see popularity wise, actually a lot of mono red in best of 3, which is kind of surprising. 5-color domain also, enchantments also. And the like Rakdos, I mean, it's still pretty popular, Grixis and Rakdos, but the win rates for those two has dropped quite a bit, which tells you something. It seems like people are playing a lot of anti Grixis anti-Rakdos decks right now because it's kind of known as like the best deck because of the last Pro Tour. So people are really targeting those decks. And because of that, we see a lot of other decks doing quite well in best of 3, which is very unusual. Hasn't really happened since, I want to say, Phyrexia All Will Be One came out. Rakdos and Grixis were kind of like top decks, and then nothing was really dethroning them for a really long time. So very interesting to see. And then if we look at the tier list, Soldiers and Mono Red are your top 2 decks in best of 3, at least for right now. But that is really crazy. So these are decks which were doing really great in best of 1, and people were kind of saying like aggro isn't good enough in best of 3. However, we see here that that's not the case. And I think as the meta is shifting away from Rakdos a little bit, people are playing Rakdos and they realize they're losing to 5-color decks, they're losing to enchantment decks, maybe even losing some of the time to reanimator decks. So yeah, it seems like these new decks that are coming in to beat Rakdos are then losing to the aggro decks, and so that's how they can take advantage of it. I also wanted to take a look at the Soldiers deck to see if there was any new innovations that they've added to help with the best of 3. And from what I can tell, there are quite a few new things. We see Knight Errant of Aeneas is in here, which is not a soldier, but people are playing it just for the card advantage. And you can usually get a lot of creatures early game, and then it starts to fizzle out if the opponent can kind of deal with them. So I guess having this Convoke Knight Errant of Aeneas in there, you can get a couple more cards to keep your board state rolling and do well. Also, Zephyr Sentinel is one that isn't played very often, but having the flash creature that can protect one of your important pieces is probably also something that's very good against Rakdos, or you can flash it in to sack to the Invoke Despair instead of something else. So yeah, I think these are kind of smart innovations in the deck. And Spell Pierce, I don't think was usually in the main deck. That's also something interesting to see. I guess there's enough enchantments and things like that that having the Spell Pierce is worth it. Green white enchantments, you know, one of the big ones. The Reanimator has the Cruelty of Gix, and Rakdos has Invoke Despair and Chandra. So yeah, probably there's always some target that you can use the Spell Pierce for. That's about it. We do see Destroy Evil is kind of the removal of choice now because of the enchantments in the format, which makes a lot of sense. So yeah, interesting to see. We'll see how well this works out. I mean, if we can get some tournament results where aggro is doing well also, not just ladder results, then that will really kind of solidify that the meta has shifted and aggro is becoming kind of the de facto choice at this point. Okay, well, let's take a look at the historic meta next. So a lot of people playing Wizards still, and Hammer Time and Control, of course, always a favorite. And then Crucius decks taking up the rear after that. And a few other choice things that people like Elves and Mill and stuff like that. But overall, the win rate is best for the Hammer Time deck. That's what we're seeing. Hammer Time doing very well. For a while, people were playing green-white Hammer Time. There was also a white-red Hammer Time. But it looks like people have kind of settled on the Bant Hammer Time now. And I think it's mostly because of this card, Invisible Stalker. Very annoying creature to deal with, hexproof, can't be blocked. So you really have to have a sweeper, but not a lot of decks playing sweepers right now in the format. So you get this down, you throw a hammer on it, and suddenly you have a turn 2 lethal, not turn 2 lethal, 2-turn lethal that can't be destroyed by most decks. Yeah, unless you're blue-white control with your Wrath of Gods or something like that. So it makes sense that it's doing so well. It's also very resilient with Sigarda's Aid and Kemba and Kemba's Outfitter and Kemba Ka Enduring. All of these kind of give you that ease of equipping your stuff to your creatures. Instead of just having the 4 ofs, you have 10 different ways to do it. So very powerful, very hard to deal with. And I guess adding in the reality chip gives you a little bit of extra draw as well on top of that. So yeah, that's the latest innovation for Hammer Time. It is doing very well, as you can see, 65% just about, and definitely the strongest deck in Historic at the moment, at least in best of 1. All right, as far as tournaments go, we see that Rakdos and Grixis are still doing very well in the tournament scene, though there is the new contender, Selesnya Enchantments. I think because people don't have the new Aftermath cards, you know, it's less likely that you're going to see that many Aftermath decks yet until maybe some more packs get cracked or the cards become a little bit more available. But this goes to show you that the Enchantments deck is no joke with the new Calyx. And if we can see Enchantments start getting some more W's here in these tournaments, then we might start to see aggro decks coming up and a few other things like that, where it's not just all Rakdos midrange and Grixis everywhere in the format. Okay, so that's the Pizza Box Open. We had one other tournament, the Standard Challenge from MTG. Oh, I guess it's a tournament. It's kind of a tournament. The winner of that one was a mono white control deck with no new cards whatsoever, so pretty boring. Second place was a Grixis list, also no new cards. Sad. And then Rakdos Rakdos mid-range. Again, no new cards. And finally, fourth place was a Rakdos Reanimator, also no new cards. So yeah, that was a pretty boring one. Yeah, maybe again, people not really willing to get the new Aftermath cards unless they know they're good. So we just have kind of a boring top 8 there. Just all old decks, nothing special. Right, so let's move on to the spicy decks. So I did find some interesting success in Standard recently, which has brought kind of rekindled my spark in Standard. And that is that mill control decks are doing very, very well. It seems like the format for enchantments is a little bit slower, and Rakdos and Grixis are both pretty slow decks. And I think Esper Legends has kind of died out a little bit. So kind of just the perfect spot for Mill to be good. It's good against all these more dirtily decks, and has a lot of life gain, so it can survive against the aggro decks. But yeah, so here's kind of a list. I know it's in Japanese, so I'll just explain it out to you. Or you can check out my other video. Played this on my channel. But we've got Jace, we've got the multiverse card here. We got the Mindbreaker, which mills the opponent's deck and has Unearth. So you're gonna cast like your Faithful Mendings and your Founding of the Third Path, and you're gonna discard your Mindbreakers into the graveyard, or even your multiverses into the graveyard, and then you can recast them later with your Founding. Also, you can unearth it, so you kind of want to discard it so it's cheaper than 7 mana. All the while, you're getting lots of life gain from your Sunset Revelry and your Faithful Mending here. And so basically, usually you'll be at like 26 health or so, which is a nice little buffer so that you don't die early. You also have the Lockdown here and the, well, these two other sweeper cards, Depopulate and Farewell, to kind of clear up the board and just make it so that your mill win con is very easy to achieve. All right, so this is one of them. Yeah, I have another one here. So this is another control mill deck that MTG Brew Lab made. Pretty similar, but this one's a little bit more at instant speed, so you don't have to tap out. But it is probably a little bit more susceptible to aggro decks, I would feel. So it has some removal, it has some counters, has some draw, some Void Rends, 2 sweepers, Mind Splice Apparatus, and yeah, the early game you want to use your unions to kind of survive and your removal to survive. Get your Mind Splice down, then maybe cast a Sunfall to clear up the board and win with your Breach and your Jace. So yeah, it makes sense, sound strategy. I think, yeah, I do think that other decks I've played of this type They do okay against aggro, but they definitely struggle against a decent curve from the opponent's decks. However, when I was playing this one, I had no trouble with aggro. Like, as long as you get a Sunset Revelry or Faithful Mending, you're usually set because you can stall the board game or stall the game out a bit until you can find a sweeper. And the Faithful Mending really gets you a lot of draw, gets you really deep into your deck to find your answers. So, very sweet. Okay, and then besides that deck, the mill deck, Calyx has been doing very, very well. So we got an enchantment deck here from a good Japanese player. Got to Mythic with this, did very well with this. It's pretty similar to the one Croaky's been playing. I'm not sure if Croaky's had this battle to get Afara, but a lot of people playing that one now. Gets you your removals and flips into a pretty good creature that draws you cards. And Mythic Matt also playing something similar. Calyx, Yukai, Weaver, Audacity, etc. So, enchantments, doing pretty well. A lot of people having a lot of success with enchantments. So maybe enchantments takes down Rakdos, then aggro takes down enchantments, then mill takes over everything. So maybe we're gonna have a new format. Pretty crazy. Just a few new cards added, and yet the format is changing and evolving. So I didn't think it at first, but Aftermath is, I guess, a decent set. Calyx is there, Samut is there, doing some good work. A few of the humans cards also doing quite well. And I actually tried a little bit of dragons earlier, and I think dragons could be good. Could be good. Ash Lizzle also was doing pretty well in vampires, though I tried vampires. I think you have to be really in love with vampires. I don't think it's going to have a high win rate. Definitely a positive win rate, but it feels to me like a tier 2 deck. But dragons actually felt pretty good. So we'll see if I can't get a good dragons deck working and make a video about that. But for now, Mill is my deck of choice. Got me easily into Diamond in just like half a day of playing, and then already working my way up to Mythic with it. So Mill is definitely a solid choice if you like control. Yeah, it's honestly one of the only control decks I've had work for me in a long time. So very, very happy about that. Like over 70% win rate on that one. Pretty sweet. Okay, I think that's going to be it. We do have a little bit of Magic news. I posted earlier on my channel a video about the bans that are upcoming, but in case you didn't see that, they have announced officially that they're going to have some bans on the 29th of this month to kind of, I don't know, initiate the new non-rotation happening. They said like every year, about a month before the rotation is going to happen, they're going to have a series of bans. And since this year there's no rotation happening, they're just going to do the bans and then not have a rotation. So we'll see what they end up doing with. I assume Fable of the Mirror Breaker is going to get banned. The other stuff is unknown. Is there going to be more than that? We'll see. But check out my other video. We talk about it a lot over there and speculate a little bit on some of the bans. Alrighty. Yep, that's it for today. Go out there, have some fun on the ladder, and until next time, see ya.